Elizabeth Evans, and I'm a homeschooling mom of 4 young kids. I'm figuring this out as I go, but I'm here to talk to Bonnie, who has been writing and speaking on the subject for over a decade and has been homeschooling for 3 decades.
My name's Bonnie Landry. I've got 7 kids. They're ages 13 to 33. I've been homeschooling for 29 years. I'm a wife, a mom, a grandma. I'm a speaker and a writer, and I'm an advocate of joy. So we're here to provide this podcast so that homeschooling can look like you imagined it to be. Hi, Elizabeth. Good evening.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Great. So Elizabeth had this great idea that we talk about storybooks and maybe share our favorite storybooks and move away from answering questions for this particular podcast. So I think that was a great idea. And we're always looking for new resources. As moms, we're always looking for new excellent books for our kids. So that's where we're going to go with this. So I had a couple of thoughts. You had a couple of thoughts about books and heading into summer. So, and then I have some thoughts as well on reading.
Well, I just thought it was the perfect time because as summer is really kind of hitting full swing and hopefully libraries are starting to open up again all around the country, I figured it was a perfect time for parents to figure out what books to get for their kids for summer reading.
Yeah, good idea. Or birthdays, or whatever's coming up in the next couple of months. Yes, and we have a huge library of children's books, and I've actually started moving some of them to a bookshelf downstairs so that my daughters can just help themselves for their kids, right? Because they're all good books. But it's silly for us to have 300 storybooks when they could be using in their sort of daily life, right?
Right.
The other thing that I was thinking of in terms of as a mom, I had some couple of policies around storybooks or any books that I thought were worth sharing. One is that I did not read books I didn't like, right? So if I didn't like a book, out it went, because nothing is worse than cringing while you read a book that you really dislike. And usually if a book is well written, an adult likes it too. So I might read it once or twice and then, out it goes. And I had a friend who we live rurally, so going to the library on a regular basis wasn't something that we did, but we built our home library. And she would let her kids basically take out whatever they wanted from the library, but when they got home, they would read it once, and if she thought it was garbage, she would say, "That's garbage," and she would put it up on a high shelf. You know what I mean? Because she didn't want the going to the library to mean she was forced to read a bunch of stuff she didn't think was valuable to her children or enjoyable for her to read. So I thought that was a good idea. Yeah. But I also, before we jump into our books, I wanted to just say we had our first class, the homeschool history class, on Tuesday night. Went really, really well, was well attended, and we had lots of fun. It was a live class, lots of questions, lots of great conversation, and lots of really good ideas about what would make good topics for the future. So that, moms were kind of throwing out some ideas. And so one of them was writing, and particularly on writing a really good solid paragraph. So that's, I think, will probably be the next class that we do. So in the next couple of days, I'll put that up on my blog and Facebook. And another one that came up was doing a class for couples, like talking about discipline as couples, right? So that that we can be more likely be on the same page and be at least exposed to the same kind of information, so that we can have sort of maybe better conversations about how situations should be managed or handled or whatever. So I thought those were cool ideas. So
well, I really love
work on that.
Yeah, I love the idea of getting the spouse involved too. So it's not just the mom, but being on the same page is important. So that's a great class idea.
Yeah, I thought so too. Yeah. So do you want to go first?
Oh, sure. We could alternate or whatever. I love finding books for my kids, just being able to help them grow their imagination with illustration and stories and
sparking so much conversation. Reading aloud is just, we've lost oral tradition. That's not something we really do anymore, but books give us an opportunity to access the kinds of things that our children want to know about, and it raises their questions. It raises our awareness of answering questions. So good literature for kids it's such an important topic. So
yes.
that's a great idea.
illustration is important too, because like you said, you don't want to read a book that you don't like. And especially when kids ask you to read it over and over and over again.
And they do.
Yeah. And so if it doesn't have, nice artwork or pretty pictures, I tend to kind of put it back on the shelf.
Yeah.
It has to be a really, really good story to get me to get it with bad artwork.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, for sure.
For
sure. Yeah. Because we want to draw them in and expose them to beauty, truth, and goodness everywhere we go.
Right. So for those watching on YouTube, you'll be able to actually see, I'll hold up the books that I have. And for the podcast, I'll be sure to put the title and the author. So those that are just listening.
Yeah, I thought too, it might be nice for us to put the links to all these books on Amazon or whatever thing in the show notes.
Yeah.
Whatever, wherever we can find them, or if it's a particular author, to their website or something like that, so that people can access things easily.
Yeah.
And so for the listeners, we'll say the title and the author out loud and put it in the show notes as well.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to start with my absolute favorite children's author.
Okay.
His name is William Joyce. He's done so many books. He's actually also responsible for, there was a show on, I think, the Disney Channel when I was probably in middle school called Roly Poly Oly. And it was about a robot family. Anyway, his mind, he's brilliant, his imagination, his artwork. And so I think part of the reason I love it so much is because his character, Jack Frost, reminds me of my oldest son. And so here's Jack Frost, and it's the Guardians of Childhood. So he's done it in children's illustrated books, and then he also has the series for like juvenile fiction books, like the big chapter books.
And is he both author and illustrator?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so I want to read the first line of his Jack Frost book, which is actually technically the last in his series of more of the juvenile fiction books, so the chapter books. So this is the first line. Well, he kind of has bumpers in his book. So the beginning of his books kind of start the same. So the first line of the Jack Frost story says, "There once was a remarkable boy." And I don't know, just the power in those first words that just hooked me. And especially since I associate that with my son,
right.
I'm thinking, my son is remarkable. This is excellent. But I'll just show, like, the artwork is just, it's just captivating.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, it's just, and
he's got lots of drama.
Yes, drama, and really just strong characters. And I don't know if anybody has heard of the Guardians of Childhood, the movie that came out, I would say in maybe 2015, or I don't know, sometime in the last 10 years it came out. And I was very skeptical because of the portrayal of Santa Claus. I'm a big fan of the Santa with the red hat and the big red coat.
Right.
And his approach is a more like a Russian, really tough Santa with like some tattoos that say naughty and nice. And so I thought, no, that is not Santa Claus. And then I watched the movie, and it was like at that moment I knew, okay, I need to check out these books. And so my son and I have been reading the series for, like juvenile fiction, the big chapter books. And he's even read them twice through now.
Okay, cool.
He just loves them. So that's my favorite author, William Joyce.
Okay.
Beautiful books, beautiful artwork. And so, yeah, I thought I'd start with a really
Sure. Now, something to bear in mind is my books are all probably going to be quite a bit older than yours, because I've been, building a library for the last 30 years. So, and of course, my youngest is almost 14 now. So, we haven't bought children's books for a long time, except for grandkids, right? And actually the ones we buy for them tend to be the books that we loved and books that their parents loved, right?
Yeah.
So actually I'll show you the one. This is when my daughters all had their first baby, this was the first baby shower gift that I got for all of them, was a really good Mother Goose book. Okay, so not exactly a storybook, but this one is illustrated by Rosemary Wells, and I just adore her depiction of characters. So it's been around a long time, so a lot of people may have seen it, but it's just classic Mother Goose tales, but they're just, again, really beautifully illustrated. If you're familiar with Rosemary Wells at all, one of her characters or group of characters was made into a little TV show as well, and I don't remember which ones, but it's really beautiful and very old-fashioned versions of the classic nursery rhymes. So this is a lot of what we do when we first start dictation with my kids. It's a lot of times we're working out of this book. We have several nursery rhyme books, but I would say this is my favorite. You can tell because the bindings are wearing out now, right? Yeah. So yeah, love it.
Oh, that's great. It reminds me, I wonder if is it Ruby and Max? Is that
yes, that's her.
Yeah. We have
fabulous,
one of those books. Yeah. Okay. This next book, this illustrator, I don't know if he's done any other books. I think you can buy his artwork. But PJ Lynch illustrated it. The book is by Gina Wilson. It's called Ignis. This was my now 5-year-old son's favorite book for when he was 3. But it's like kind of a bigger kid book, and it's about a dragon. I love
3-year-olds love dragons.
Yeah. But it's about a dragon who cannot breathe fire. And so he goes searching for his flame. And he meets a little girl and, has a friendship. I mean, it's just the sweetest thing. But like this image right here is just,
it's beautiful.
So beautiful. So like I said, illustration is huge for me. But it's a really good story. And I mean, I would read this over and over again. Not a problem.
Good. Okay. So this book here, this is actually a board book, and it's called The Tale of the Three Trees. Do you know this one?
Yes.
Love this book. So it actually comes, this is sort of an edited version. There's a longer version of it that comes in a, just a hardcover, or probably get it as paperback as well. But this is the board book version, which I really love. And for those of you who don't know the story, it's a tale of these 3 trees, and they all imagine that they're going to grow up to be something important. I think this one might be worth a read. Should I read it out loud? It's super short.
Sure, go for it.
Okay, let's read it out loud. I'll probably cry. Okay. Excuse me. Once upon a mountain top, 3 trees dreamed of what they wanted to become when they grew up. I want to hold treasure, the first tree said. I will be the most beautiful treasure chest in the whole world. I want to be a strong sailing ship, the second tree said. I will be the strongest ship in the world. I don't want to leave this mountaintop at all, the third tree said. I want to grow so tall that when people look at me, they will raise their eyes to heaven and think of God. I will be the tallest tree in the world. I'm going to show you the picture of the trees. The illustrations are gorgeous in this. One day, 3 woodcutters climbed the mountain. With a swoop of the first man's axe, the first tree fell. With a swish of the second man's axe, the second tree fell. With a slash of the third man's axe, the third tree fell. The first tree rejoiced when the woodcutter brought him to a carpenter's shop, but the busy carpenter was not thinking about treasure chests. Instead, his work-worn hands fashioned the tree into a feed box for animals. The second tree smiled when the woodcutter took him to a shipyard, but no mighty sailing ships were built that day. Instead, the once strong tree was made into a simple fishing boat. The third tree was confused when the woodcutter cut her into strong beams and left her in the lumberyard. What happened? The once tall tree wondered. All I ever wanted to do was to point to God. Many, many days and nights passed. The 3 trees nearly forgot their dreams. But one night, golden starlight poured over the first tree as a young woman placed her newborn baby in the feed box. And suddenly the first tree knew he was holding the greatest treasure in the world. One evening, a tired traveler and his friends crowded into the old fishing boat. When a storm arose, the second tree shuddered, but when the traveler stretched out his hand and said, "Peace," the storm stopped. And suddenly the second tree knew he was carrying the King of heaven and earth. One Friday morning, the third tree was startled when her beams were yanked from the woodpile. She shivered when she was dragged through an angry crowd. She shuddered when soldiers nailed the man's hands to her. She felt ugly and harsh and cruel. But on Sunday morning, when the sun rose and the earth trembled with joy beneath her, the third tree knew God's love had changed everything. It had made the first tree beautiful. It had made the second tree strong. And every time people thought of the third tree, they would think of God. Oh, I love that story.
It's so good. My 4-year-old.
It's so good.
Yeah. I read it the other day to my 4-year-old.
Yeah. Powerful story. Mm-hmm.
There's actually also a little film you can get. My mom was a teacher, and so she had the film and gave it to us. And
oh, so, really? I've never seen. Is it the same illustrations?
No.
Okay.
It's not. Yeah. But,
okay. Cool. I'll have to look it up.
Yeah.
All right. What have you got for us?
Well, keeping on the same topic, actually, I don't know if you've seen this. This is a story of John Paul II, Saint John Paul II, a boy who became Pope, by Fabiola Garza. And the illustrations are really similar to, like, they remind me a little bit of Disney illustrations in a way.
Right.
But it's the story of how John Paul II became Pope and then eventually Saint.
And is there a lot of text or is it more story?
Yeah, there's a lot of text. So this is kind of for kids who are able to sit still for extended periods of time. But,
right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they even use the name that his friends gave him growing up, Lolek. And so it's just really
Love
sweet.
it.
And what a great way to learn about, a saint.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of beautiful saint stories.
Yeah.
Actually, that will bring me, I'll pop over to a different book because it also has some saint stories by the same author.
Yeah.
Not that author, but I'm a big fan of Tomie de Paola, who just passed away. Of course, I was so sad because I just have adored his work for years. Yeah. And he is Italian. I think he's Italian Irish American. So his ancestry is Italian Irish, and but he's American, of course, and his stories are really laced with his cultural background, particularly Italian and Catholic, which is really interesting. So he is the author of the Stregonona books, which is Stregonona means grandma witch, right?
Yeah.
And she's a woman in the village, and he has a series of those, but he also has a huge series of saints books that are just, and saint stories that are just beautiful and very little text, really just vibrant, beautiful, gorgeous pictures that talk about mostly saints from Italy, but not all of them. And so his Italian background is really clear in this, as he talks about the little Italian villages and the things that they sort of the day-to-day life of these saints. So I would recommend any of his books. I've never found a book of his I didn't love, but in particular his saints books. But the one I actually brought, my absolute favorite of his, is this one. It's called Clown of God. Oh my gosh. For those of you listening, Elizabeth has just picked up the exact same book. I cry every time I read.
It's so good.
It's so good.
Yeah.
And so I'll just give a recap, sort of a cap of the story. Basically the story is this man who's a clown. He's a little boy who learns how to be a clown to earn his keep because he's an orphan, and he becomes a very, very famous clown, and he lives out for years and years and years being a famous clown and wanting in every town. And as he gets older, of course, he's loses favor with the crowds, and so finally he becomes old and not wanted anymore, and he just sort of travels from place to place like he did when he was young, you know, baking bread and whatnot. And one day at the very end of the story, he's sleeping in the doorway of a church, and he goes into the church. He sees all these people going into the church, and he realizes he's been away from the church for a long time, really care about it. And he goes into the church, follows all the crowd in, and realizes it's Christmas Eve. And they're all bringing gifts to the baby, you know, bread and little gifts that they've made for the statue of the baby Jesus, or there's a Madonna and baby Jesus inside the church. And he doesn't have anything to give the baby. So after everyone leaves, he decides, he puts on his clown outfit again, and he juggles for the baby Jesus. And I won't give away the ending of the story, but in his gift to the baby Jesus, there's this beautiful miracle that happens. And oh my gosh, I'm not kidding. I cannot get through it. I've had it for 25 years. I can't get through it without crying.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah. So that's Tomie de Paola, Clown of God.
I think that was my introduction to, oh no, actually he wrote a book called Alice Nizzy Nazzy. And it's
I've never read that one.
It's really good. It's about, there's this witch that lives in this hut with, I think chicken feet, and it follows her wherever she goes. And then there's this one girl that was tending her flock of sheep, and the witch, turns the flock into pillows. And so this little girl is trying to get her sheep back.
Right.
And it's kind of like a mixture of the like Hansel and Gretel witch, where she wants to, you know, put her in a pot and stew her. And so I forget actually how it ends, but yeah, that was my introduction to him. And I loved this book growing up. And then I found out about like the Clown of God, and I actually brought one of his other books. It's Jamie O'Rourke and the Puka. So
you know what? So I haven't seen that one either.
This one is really
probably his
good.
more recent. Yeah. Well, it looks like it has his Irish ancestry.
Yeah, I guess it was written in 2000.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, but it's about Jamie O'Rourke is kind of lazy, and his wife goes away to tend her sister, I think, and he's supposed to clean the house, and he has his friends over every night, and they don't clean. But then a puka comes, and so it's a magical puka. It's just kind of this figure, this spirit that looks kind of like a donkey,
right,
in this case.
Okay.
And the puka comes in and does dishes. And then the last time the puka comes, you'll have to read the book and find out.
teaser. It's amazing what gets us excited as parents, isn't it?
Right.
Okay. Jane, okay. So another favorite author of mine. I'm a big Dr. Seuss fan.
Yeah.
There's the odd one I have not cared for, but this has been a family favorite. Go Dog Go has always been a family favorite, and Are You My Mother? Those I would say were the two top Dr. Seuss. Just fantastic stories, and you know, everybody will be familiar, of course. And yeah, this book got nicknamed Godog Godot because one of our kids couldn't say Go Dog Go, so they said Godog Godot, so it's still called Godog Godot.
How funny.
Yeah.
Well, on the topic of those kind of easy reader books, I don't know if you've heard of Mo Willems and his Elephant and Piggie books.
No.
These were my kids' favorites. And I went to try and have my 5-year-old read it to me, but he's memorized it. So it ended up not being a very good, can you read this book? But it's just about Elephant and Piggie are great friends. And there's, very little text. Most pages have like maybe 1 to 5 words on it.
Right. Okay, fun.
But it's just funny. So this one is Listen to My Trumpet. And it's about how Piggie gets a trumpet and he's playing it, playing music, and Elephant's like, that does not sound like music.
Right.
And it turns out that the pig is not trying to play music. He's trying to speak like Elephant because he wants to sound like his friend Elephant.
Oh, okay. Well, I will tell you this, just, our kids all play musical instruments. And one day we were over at a friend's house years ago, and their son was practicing their trumpet. And I thought, Oh, wow. I didn't realize how happy I am that nobody ever picked up a trumpet to learn on. And,
Oh man.
although, we would have supported that, but I was so grateful because at the time, my daughter, who was the same age as their son, was actually taking harp, and you can play a harp really badly and it still sounds really good.
Right. Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
my kids play piano and that, unless they're like slamming their fists on the
Exactly.
piano.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't really mess it up too badly. You can mess the
Right.
song up, but the notes still sound good. So,
Right. Right.
okay. So this is an absolute favorite of mine. And this book is called Something from Nothing by Phoebe Gilman. Phoebe Gilman was really popular when I first started having kids. She did the Gillian Jiggs books. I don't know if you would remember those from your childhood, but this, some of her stories I have loved, some have been, sort of okay, but this one is just, I don't know, head and shoulders above all of them, in my opinion. And I'm just going to say something before I tell you a little bit about the story, that I think a whole other topic that could be addressed is actually books that help children, like that you could use as jumping off places to study science and social studies with really young kids.
Yeah.
Would be kind of a neat topic to do, because there's many beautiful storybooks, and I sort of sifted through mine and I thought, okay, well, most of them are ones that are would just be a storybook classification, but there are so many that could sort of help either bring younger kids into a study, or could help, could introduce a topic to young kids, right? So this would fall into that category, but because it's such a family favorite, I thought I would share it. So yeah, Something from Nothing. So basically it's a story about a little Jewish boy and his family, and his father makes him a blanket when he's born. And as he gets older, the blanket gets repurposed into different things. And the beautiful illustrations are, as the grandpa is, first of all, it's just filled with beautiful sort of traditional Jewish village images, right? And they're having dinner together as a family on the weekend and whatnot. Really beautiful. But at the bottom, I don't know if you can see this, Elizabeth, but at the bottom here, there's a whole other frame. There's the main frame of the story, and on the bottom, every time he cuts the blanket into something smaller to repurpose it, all the little scraps drop through the floorboards to a mouse family, and the mouse family makes things out of it. So over the years of him growing up, not only is he getting these repurposed things, but the mouse family is getting all decked out in the fabric from his beautiful blanket. So
that's wonderful.
yeah, it's just a fantastic folk story.
Oh,
so
that's great. I have so many. Okay. I'll go to Jan Brett. I don't know how familiar you are with.
I love Jan Brett. Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't actually find one. They get read a lot and carted around the house because our grandbabies are over, so I couldn't actually find any Jan Bretts.
Yeah.
The Mitten and
Yeah. So the Mitten and what was the other one from when I was a kid? I don't remember. I grew up with Jan Brett, and it wasn't until I started having kids that I realized that she had written so many more than just the ones I had. There's like Berlioz and the Bee, I think is what it's called. But anyway, this one I discovered, my my now 5-year-old loved horses when he was really small. And I came across this one, Fritz and the Beautiful Horses. And it's about this little pony who's not really welcome in this town that's only for the big, beautiful horses. And all he wants to do is just to be loved and cherished for who he is. And one day the parents are riding their big horses and the kids are riding their big horses, and they look really scared. And as they're going back to the town, the bridge starts to crack after the parents have already crossed it. And so the kids are stuck on the other side, and their horses are refusing to go into the creek because they don't want to get dirty and mussy up their beautiful coats. Right. But Fritz trots through the water and rescues the kids. And then from then on, they just love him and cherish him for who he is. So it's really, really sweet. And she has the, is it the Swedish kind of artwork.
Yeah, she does such beautiful sort of folk artwork as well,
Yeah.
and that's what sort of her trademark. So those of you who haven't seen Jan Brad or are unfamiliar, just
Yeah.
look up her illustrations. They're just incredible. So
Yeah.
you really
Oh, I
enjoy them.
remember my favorite one of hers is actually a Christmas book. That's why I couldn't remember it right away. It's The Wild Christmas Reindeer.
Oh,
And
okay. I've never heard of it.
oh, it's so good. It's about training the reindeer to fly Santa's sleigh, and
Right.
how they can be unruly, and yeah, it's really good.
So do all of her books have the folk art sort of theme to them?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, because that was
Yeah.
the thing about the mitten, and the other one, the name I can't think of right now. It's just the borders and the decoration, and it's just so
Yeah.
rich. It's just so rich.
Except I think this was the first one I'd seen that did not have the borders, because that's her
Okay,
trademark, are the
yeah,
borders.
and the
But
story going on within the border kind of thing.
right,
Yeah,
but this one doesn't have it. And I did misspoke. There are a couple that actually aren't the traditional kind of Swedish Nordic type illustrations. There's one called
right.
Mossy, and it's about a turtle, and that's kind of
Ah,
more of like the European 1900s type style.
interesting. Okay, I'll have to look
Yeah,
up those for sure.
yeah,
Okay, so this story, this is in my last book. Probably, if you want to do maybe one or two more after
yeah.
this one. So the cover is worn off, but it's called the Dolores Book of Greek Myths. So obviously, this is also sort of falls into the history framework, but it's just been a book that has been so loved. Like it's really chewed up, that we've read so much. So it takes all the Greek myths and it puts them. The illustrations are kind of odd. Like if anyone's familiar with Dolores, they're a little bit odd, but they work because it's Greek mythology. I think they work. And so it tells the story of several different Greek myths in a child-friendly format, but they're beautiful to read as an adult, but they're also funny. Like they've really sort of captured the kind of the humor and the lighthearted side of the Greek mythology. But my kids always knew so much about Greek mythology. I think a lot of it had to do with this, right? And then
Okay.
there's some young adult fiction that's sort of mythologically based, but they already had that sort of a leg up and they understood a lot about it.
Mhm.
So that's been a real favorite in our house as well. So
That's great.
Dolores Book of Greek Myths.
Yeah. Wow. I'm gonna have to look that one up.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I for sure will have to share, and I feel like I'm gonna butcher her last name. Um, I don't know if you've heard of Elsa Beskow, her books.
No.
Okay, so she writes and beautiful illustrations, these Swedish stories,
Okay.
and they're just so great and simple and sweet. And there's one that we have called Hazel and Pip, and I don't know. It's a cute story, like a lot of gnomes and like little elves, and
Right.
like this one is about Mother Nature and weather,
Right.
and it's really sweet. And so my kids really enjoy them, and yeah, we've got a couple of her books. So I really
Okay.
recommend Elsa Beskow for those beautiful.
One of the things that we did at the live class on Tuesday was I read a storybook out loud for the point of illustrating how we can pull, sort of curriculum, for lack of a better word, out of a storybook, how we can use that as jumping off place for further study or to engage younger children.
Mhm.
And I just read a storybook that wasn't sort of historically significant in any way, but there's every page is just rich with things that we can talk about. Not that we have to talk about them, but that as kids ask those questions, to be able to really engage with a book and really bring it to life for them.
Mhm.
And even something like, just I'm thinking of Jan Brett's, or the one you just showed, Ollie, the illustrations in that, showing another culture, what a beautiful opportunity to talk about, another culture. Like, why, you know, what do you think their clothes look? Do people wear clothes like that around here? You know, and I think that's that would be a great topic, actually, sort of how to capitalize on reading to our kids and what that means. One of the books that I wrote is called How to Read a Book So It Becomes the Curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we can just read a book and enjoy it. We can read a book and answer all the questions full of wonder, but we can also really plumb a book for all it's worth. And ideally, especially with storybooks, we do all of that, right? Sometimes we read it and do a lot of wondering about it. Sometimes we pull lots out of it. Sometimes we just pull a little bit out of it. But over the course of, you know, our family history, we're going to really get to know those books. Books create a culture, right? They create a family culture. And I don't know if this has started in your family, but we have so many sort of isms, you know, Landry isms that come from books we've read together, storybooks, novels, all kinds of books that, you know, just a turn of a phrase or a particular character's personality just comes into our family culture, you know. And one of my my youngest daughter, when she was really small, she was talking about our family being like the 100-acre woods, right? You know, we're like the guys in the 100-acre woods. And you know, so then, you know, Noah is Pooh, and you know, you're Kanga Mom, and I'm Roo, of course, and Daddy is Eeyore. You know, Abel is Tigger, you know. And so she went through this, you know, but we totally got it because it was just such a part of our family culture for so many years, you know. And what a beautiful way to form your family through literature and reading together, right? Because those are some of our most joyful memories come from reading together. You know, because we don't sit down and read, we're in a crappy mood, right? You know, we want this to be happy. So yeah.
Well, and I don't know if you've heard of Sarah Mackenzie. She wrote a book called Read Aloud Revival.
Yeah,
and she talks about just what you were talking about, is how books can kind of bring families together in a common, you know, even if it's just a little phrase. Like we got a book from the library called The Unbudgeable Curmudgeon. And it was right around a time where my son was this book's definition. He was a curmudgeon. And it became this funny thing where, you know, we were like, oh, Henry, you're the curmudgeon. And he loved it, you know, because he knew he could relate to that. And we weren't making fun of him. We were, you know, saying, we love you because this is how you are sometimes. And, you know,
we can even love the curmudgeons.
Right.
Well, it was funny because my son, who's almost 23, a couple of days ago, are you familiar with the Richard Scarry books?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So there's Pig Will and Pig Won't in the Richard Scarry books. And he says, how did Pig Won't become Pig Me Too? I can't remember. He's 23 and he's wondering this. And so I sort of recap the story for him, you know, okay, well, this is what happened with Pig Will. But, you know, Pig Will and Pig Won't was very common as well in our family. Like, you know, we're having a Pig Won't moment here. You know, but so many beautiful isms and beautiful family culture just created from literature. And that's why it's so important to choose well. You know, in the show notes, I'll put down a couple of resources that I used as well for helping me know what to choose for good literature. Because, you know, I mean, the reality is usually the library carries, you know, really beautiful literature, but they can also carry, you know, garbagey stuff too, right? It's just sort of pop, you know, pop culture kids books, which is unfortunate. And you know, but it is what it is, and we just have to be discerning as parents. So I'll put in some discerning resources and book lists in the show notes as well, because I think it's really important to do that. I've got actually a couple of blog posts that share all kinds of resources for that sort of thing. So
well, and really quick, I also feel I should share, I didn't really appreciate books that did not have any words, any story to them, you know, that are just pictures, until kind of recently. I didn't realize how valuable those are to imaginations, you know, and teaching kids to kind of be able to interpret and almost tell their own story based on what they're seeing. And so I have one of those books is Journey by Aaron Becker. And the cover has ripped, so now it's just the pretty book. But it's really just beautiful artwork, very just magical.
Wow.
Yeah, and I mean, you can really kind of see clearly the story that's being told with just these images. But it also, there's a lot of room for, you know, kind of slightly different interpretations of every time you read it. And so this is like a 3-part series. So there's actually 3 of them.
Okay.
I just brought one to
That's
show
beautiful.
right now, but
Eric, the only book that we had that didn't have stories, same thing. It was a very popular book in our house, and the kids would, you know, Dad would read it one way and I would read it a different way, you know, read it, tell the story. And it's actually by Eric Carle. So you guys are probably all familiar with, you know, the Very Hungry Caterpillar and the Eric Carle books, which are really charming as well. And so it's one of that style of book. And it's called To the Zoo, 1, 2, 3 to the Zoo. And so the story unfolds of all these animals getting to the zoo, and it's really sweet and no words, and you know, just the story unfolds. But it's incredible for their imagination. Plus, little kids who don't read yet can sit down and read that book, right? And have their own little story going on with it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know I could do this all night. There's another author that I just love. It's Don and Audrey Wood. And one would write and the other would illustrate. And so you've got the little mouse, the red ripe strawberry, and the big hungry bear, the napping house. What was another one? King Big Goods in the bathtub. These are all just kid stories that my kids love. Really fun illustrations. A lot of
as we've been talking, all these stories that I, you know, think, oh, I should have brought that, but then, you know, we would be here for 4 hours probably. But so I should probably do some wrap up because we're almost pushing on an hour here. So I should quickly mention, I had an interesting conversation with my daughter this morning, whose, you know, son is 4, and he's just, you know, sort of getting to the point of, you know, interested in letters and interested in sounds and all of that. And, you know, so we talked about how I used to read to our little kids, and I would often at least once in almost every book we read, I would point to, you know, like a letter and say, do you know what sound that makes? Or, oh, look, that's a letter B, and just take their finger and trace it. And it was one of these little beautiful little moments where I wasn't hammering, I wasn't doing it every page, I wasn't doing it every minute, but, you know, just maybe once or twice during the course of a story, you know, let them trace a letter, or let them, you know, wonder, oh, say that's, you know, that's bear. What do you think that letter is that bear starts with? And sort of bringing in, you know, early reading and letter interest, you know, when you're just reading your, you know, 50 storybooks you read in a day, right? If you do it a few times in a day, it's a remarkable move towards reading, right?
Yeah.
And just gaining their interest in letters. So I just thought I'd mention that. One of the things that, I wanted to say, please continue, people, to add questions to our Facebook page, Make Joy Normal, and or via my blog or my email address. You're welcome to put your questions there. We still have a few questions we haven't addressed, which we'll get to over the next couple of weeks. And every question seems to lead to more questions, don't you find?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So those are sort of where you can reach us. And I'll be putting a form up on this class. I'll be doing a little class on sort of introduction to writing. My goal with that class is to also lay the foundation for writing really before writing would happen, right? So that kids could be starting to be formed in writing. You know, reading beautiful literature is a big part of the formation of writing, you know, because beautiful language go in, beautiful language patterns are what we would see come out of that, right? So, you know, reading good literature isn't just because it's an enjoyable moment. It also provides them with context so that later on they can draw on their interest, imagination, experience as they go to put things into words as well. So that would be my goal, is to sort of gear it at the foundations of writing as well. So I'll have some more information on that probably next time we get together.
Great.
Yeah. So I think that's probably a wrap, eh?
Yes.
Okay.
Nice. Thank
God bless.
you.
Good night. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.